ever trying to figure out how companies, actually keep their digital stuff safe, you hear controls, then frameworks, and suddenly it's just acronym soup.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it gets overwhelming fast.
If that sounds like you, well, you're in the right spot. Welcome to the deep dive. We try to cut through that noise and just get to what you need to know.
And today we're digging into that whole world of cybersecurity controls, frameworks, and compliance. We've looked at quite a bit of material covering these.
Yeah, different sources discussing how they all link up.
Exactly. The goal is really to give you a clear picture, sort of a structured way to see how it all fits together in the real world.
Right. We want to explain how these three big pieces, controls, frameworks, compliance, actually work in tandem to, manage security and, maybe most importantly, cut down on risk.
It's about connecting those dots for you.
And maybe finding a few aha moments along the way without burying you in details. So our mission today, understand how these elements collaborate and also touch on the whole ethical side of things.
Okay, so to start, it probably helps to grasp the real foundation here, the bedrock, if you will. That's the CIA triad.
Ah, yes, CIA. Not that CIA, though.
No, definitely not. This stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
Right. These are like the fundamental goals for any security policy, aren't they?
Pretty much. Confidentiality is, it's about keeping secret, making sure only authorized people can access sensitive info, limiting access.
Got it. Keep things private.
Then you have integrity. This is all about trust.
Yeah.
Is the data accurate? Is it authentic? Has it been tampered with when it shouldn't have been? You need to rely on it being correct.
So making sure the information is trustworthy and hasn't been, sneakily changed.
Exactly. And the last one is availability. This means the right people can actually get to the data and systems when they need to.
Yeah, because if everything's locked down so tight that legitimate users can't get their work done, that's a problem too, right?
Precisely. If the system's down or the data is inaccessible, the rest doesn't matter much at that moment.
Okay, so confidentiality, integrity, availability, the core goals. How do organizations actually achieve those goals?
That's where security controls come in. Controls are the specific measures, the safeguards, the actions and tools organizations put in place
to reduce specific risks.
Exactly. They're designed to reduce specific security risks, and they work hand in hand with frameworks. They're the practical steps, really guided by those CIA principles.
So controls are the hands-on tactics, protecting the data day to day. But you said they work with frameworks. Controls don't just pop up randomly then.
No, ideally not. That's where security frameworks provide the structure. Think of them as the strategic blueprints.
Okay, blueprints. I like that.
They offer guidelines for building a whole plan. A plan to manage risks, deal with threats, protect data, protect privacy.
So what goes into a typical framework?
Well, most good frameworks have usually 4 core components.
Right.
First, you got to identify and actually write down what you're trying to achieve. What are your security goals? Why?
Makes sense. Know what you're aiming for.
Second, you set the specific guidelines or policies to help you meet those goals. Third, you implement the actual security processes. The controls we talked about fit in here.
Right. The doing part.
And fourth, crucially, you monitor things and communicate. Are the controls working? Are you hitting your targets? It's a continuous loop.
Identify goals, set guidelines, implement processes, monitor, and communicate. Okay. Framework is the roadmap. Controls are the steps along the road. So where does compliance fit in this journey?
Compliance. It's quite simply about following the rules.
Rules, like laws.
Yes, partly. It covers external regulations, actual laws, industry standards you have to follow. But it also includes internal standards, the rules an organization sets for itself.
So meeting requirements from both the outside world and from within your own policies.
You got it. Making sure you're checking all the necessary boxes.
Now, when you talk about frameworks and standards, especially in the U.S., one name always comes up, NIST.
Right, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They're a U.S. agency, but their work has a huge global reach.
And they develop these compliance frameworks, but they're voluntary.
That's the interesting part, yeah. They develop voluntary frameworks. Organizations worldwide choose to adopt them because they're seen as best practice for managing risk.
So even if it's not strictly law for everyone, using NIST guidelines is a sign you're serious about security.
It definitely signals that, yes. And generally, the closer an organization aligns with something like a NIST framework, the stronger its security posture tends to be.
And they have some famous ones, right? Like the CSF.
Yes. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework, CSF, is very widely used. And the NIST Risk Management Framework, the RMF. is another big one, especially within the federal government.
It's still kind of amazing they're voluntary, but so influential.
It speaks to their quality and utility, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really important to remember that the mandatory rules, the compliance requirements, often depend heavily on the type of organization.
So it's not one size fits all for the legally required stuff.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
That brings us to things like FERC-SNERC.
Okay, FERC-SNERC, that sounds specific.
It is. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. This applies to companies involved with the power grid in the U.S. and North America.
The power grid, okay, that sounds critical.
Extremely. These organizations have a legal duty to prepare for cyber incidents, report them, and follow what are called the Critical Infrastructure Protection, or CIP reliability standards, keeping the lights on, digitally speaking.
Yeah, you don't want hackers messing with the power grid. High stakes.
Very high stakes. Then, shifting gears a bit, you have FedRAMP.
FedRAMP, heard of that one. Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program.
That's the one. It's a U.S. federal program, and it's all about standardizing security for cloud services.
Cloud services for the government.
Exactly. If a company wants to sell its cloud product or service to a U.S. federal agency, it generally needs to meet the FedRAMP requirements. It creates a consistent baseline for security assessment, authorization, and monitoring.
So it makes it easier and hopefully safer for government agencies to adopt cloud technology.
That's the idea. It aims for consistency across government and the third-party cloud providers they use. And actually, it's driven security improvements among cloud providers more broadly, because FedRAMP authorization is seen as a strong credential.
Interesting. Okay, what about CIS? Center for Internet Security.
Right. CIS is different again. They're a nonprofit, and they focus on providing very practical, actionable security controls. Things organizations can implement relatively quickly to safeguard systems and data.
Like a best practices checklist.
Sort of, but very detailed and prioritized. They're known for their benchmarks and controls. They also provide guidance on what to do after an incident. So, prevention and response.
Practical help. Good. Now let's talk global. GDPR always comes up.
Ah, yes. The EU's General Data Protection Regulation. Can't ignore that one.
What's the key thing to know about GDPR?
Its massive focus on protecting the data and privacy rights of individuals in the EU. And it applies even if the company holding the data is outside the EU.
So it has extraterritorial reach.
Big time. Transparency is huge. Companies have to be clear about what data they have, why they have it, and that breach notification rule.
The 72-hour one?
Yep. If a breach affects EU residents' data, you've got 72 hours to report it to the authorities. That's a tight deadline. And the potential fines for messing up? They can be really significant.
Wow. Okay. Definitely need your incident response ducks in a row for that. What about handling money? Credit cards.
That's where PCI DSS comes in. Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard.
Sounds straightforward.
It is, in concept. It's an international standard for any organization that handles credit card information, storing it, processing it, transmitting it. The goal is simple. Keep that card data secure and reduce fraud.
Makes sense. Secure the transaction data. Now, shifting to healthcare in the U.S.
HIK, yes. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. This is absolutely fundamental in U.S. healthcare.
Protecting patient information.
Precisely. Specifically, Protected Health Information, or PHI. HIPAA puts strict rules around how PHI can be used and disclosed. Unauthorized sharing is a big no-no.
And it has different parts.
It does. The main ones people talk about are the privacy rule, the security rule, and the breach notification rule.
Breach notification again. Seems important.
It is. If patient PHI is compromised in a breach, healthcare organizations have a legal duty to inform those patients. And PHI is broad. It covers health conditions, treatments, and payment information. Past, present, or future stuff.
Wow, okay. Very comprehensive. Is there help for organizations trying to comply with HIPAA?
There is. HRSD, for example, the Health Information Trust Alliance, provides a certification framework that many healthcare organizations use to demonstrate they meet HIPAA requirements and other security standards. It helps structure their efforts.
So HITrust helps with HIPAA compliance.
Got it. We've talked sector-specific rules, U.S. rules, EU rules. What about just general international standards?
That's often where ISO comes into play, the International Organization for Standardization.
They do standards for everything, don't they? Like quality management. They do. Thousands of standards. In cybersecurity, ISO standards, like the ISO 27001 family for information security management, provide internationally recognized frameworks and best practices. They help organizations set up and improve their processes globally.
Okay, so ISO is more about setting up good management systems for security now. SOC reports. SOC 1, SCE 2, these always felt a bit accountant-y.
Well, they kind of are. They stem from the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants.
Oh, okay. So what do they actually report on?
They focus on the controls at a service organization. SOC 1 looks at controls relevant to a client's financial reporting. SOC 2 looks at controls related to security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy, often called the trust services criteria.
So if a company uses, say, a cloud provider for critical functions, they might ask for a SOC 2 report.
Exactly. It gives them assurance about the provider's controls. It assesses things like user access policies, data safety, how they handle privacy. It's about assessing risk and compliance, particularly where financial data or sensitive operations are involved.
And failures in those controls could lead to bad things.
Oh, absolutely. Weak controls, especially around access and financial processes, can definitely open the door to fraud or other major issues.
Right. One more specific item that came up was a U.S. presidential executive order, 4x88, from May 2021.
Yes, that one came out in response to some major cyber incidents affecting the U.S. Think SolarWinds Colonial Pipeline.
Ah, okay. So what did it aim to do?
The core goal was to significantly improve the nation's cybersecurity posture. It mandated a lot of changes for federal government agencies, upgrading security practices, sharing threat information better, moving towards zero-trust architecture.
And did it affect more than just the government?
It did, particularly companies that provide services to the federal government or are part of critical infrastructure. It set new standards and expectations for them, too, pushing for faster remediation of vulnerabilities.
So a government-led push to raise the security bar across the board, really.
That's a good way to put it. A significant top-down effort.
Okay, we've covered a ton on controls, frameworks, compliance, all these standards. It really shows how they're meant to work together, doesn't it? A layered approach.
Absolutely. You need the high-level strategy from frameworks, the specific actions from controls, and the adherence to rules ensured by compliance. They all support each other in managing risk.
But there's another whole dimension we haven't fully explored yet, the ethical side of cybersecurity.
Right. Beyond just following rules and implementing tech, there are significant ethical considerations. A big one that comes up is counterattacks or hacking back.
Ah, yeah. If someone attacks you, can you attack them back? Legally? Ethically?
Well, in the U.S., the legal answer for private companies or individuals is generally a firm no.
Really? Why not?
Laws like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act basically make unauthorized access to computer systems illegal, regardless of your motivation. Hacking back is seen as vigilantism.
Vigilantism. Okay.
Plus, there's a huge risk of misattribution. What if you hit the wrong target? Or what if you hit a system that's just being used as a relay by the real attackers?
Yeah.
You could escalate things massively.
Yeah, that could get messy fast, especially internationally.
Exactly. If you accidentally hit infrastructure in another country, or the initial attack was state-sponsored, a private counterattack could have serious diplomatic or even military consequences. The Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act also plays a role here, encouraging information sharing instead of offensive action.
So who is allowed to counterattack that?
Legally, in the U.S. context, it's generally restricted to authorized federal government entities, like certain military or intelligence agencies, acting under specific legal authorities.
Not something for regular companies to try.
Definitely not recommended or legal. Now, internationally, the perspective is a bit more nuanced, but still very cautious.
How so?
The International Court of Justice has laid out some guidelines for when a countermeasure might be permissible under international law. Things like it must only target the state responsible for the initial attack. You have to have asked them to stop first. It shouldn't escalate things, and the effects should ideally be reversible.
That sounds incredibly difficult to achieve in cyberspace.
It is extremely difficult. How do you ensure you only affect the initial attacker? How do you guarantee reversibility? Most international organizations and guidance, like the Talon Manual, which explores international law applicable to cyber warfare, strongly advise against counterattacks by non-state actors due to the uncertainty and potential for making things worse.
So the consensus is pretty much, don't hack back. Focus on defense and reporting.
That's the prevailing wisdom and legal stance, yes. Now, beyond counterattacks, ethics ties back directly to those core principles we started with.
The CIA triad. Confidentiality, integrity, availability.
Exactly. Think about confidentiality from an ethical standpoint. It's not just about technical access controls. It's about having a deep respect for privacy.
Protecting private assets, private data.
Yes, safeguarding that information requires a high ethical bar, which leads directly to privacy protection as a core ethical duty.
Protecting PII and SPII, personally identifiable information and sensitive PII.
Right. PII might be things like your name, phone number, address, bad if stolen, can lead to identity theft. SPI is even more sensitive. Social security numbers, credit card details, health records. Losing that can cause immense harm.
So the ethical obligation is?
To actively secure this private information. It means identifying where the vulnerabilities are, managing the risks, and making sure your security efforts align with the organization's overall goals while prioritizing privacy.
It's woven into the job.
It has to be. And that connects to the ethical obligation regarding laws. Security professionals have a duty to protect their organization and its people, yes, but also to operate within the law.
How does that translate day to day?
It means striving for impartiality, working honestly, responsibly, respecting legal boundaries, being transparent where possible, acting justly, relying on evidence, not just hunches.
And staying sharp.
Absolutely. Being invested in the work, continuously learning and improving skills, that's part of the ethical commitment too, given how fast things change.
You mentioned IPA earlier as a law. Is that also an ethical benchmark?
I think it serves as a great example, yes. IPA is a U.S. law protecting patient health information. But for the security professional working in healthcare, ensuring the organization adheres to IPA, especially the part about informing patients of breaches involving their sensitive PHI.
That feels like more than just legal compliance.
It absolutely is. There's a profound ethical obligation there to help the organization do the right thing by the patients whose data has been potentially exposed. It's about trust and responsibility.
So, wrapping this all up, we've seen how controls, frameworks, and compliance are deeply interconnected tools for managing risk. They're the technical and procedural backbone.
Right. But layered on top, and really underpinning it all, are these crucial ethical considerations, especially around things like counterattacks, respecting privacy, and upholding the law.
Hopefully this deep dive has given you, our listener, a clearer structure for understanding this complex landscape. It connects back to that initial feeling of maybe being overwhelmed by all the terms.
Yeah, the aim was to provide that foundational understanding, cutting through some of the jargon.
And it leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? As our lives become more and more digital, everything more interconnected. How do you think that balance will shift? The balance between strong security measures on one hand and individual privacy, legal rights, and ethical duties on the other.
That's the ongoing challenge, isn't it? How do we adapt both our technology and our principles for the future of cyberspace?
Definitely something to keep pondering. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.